Hello everyone, and welcome to Animation Pilgrimage, the show where Sean and I take a look at every single theatrically released animated film in chronological order, and today we're looking at all of the 70s.
Yup. All of it. We're doing a look at everything that we have talked about up to this point.
We've spent the last year and a half?
I looked it up. It has been a year and 7 months. Almost to the day.
Wow.
Or almost to the week, I should say. From today. Today, which is March 17th, 2021 is when this episode is coming out. The first episode of the 1970s came out, which was Aladdin and His Magic Lamp, came out on August 23rd, 2019. So, like I said, almost to the week, 1 month, or 1 year, 7 months. And I do know that we technically took 1 week off in there, and we've had a few episodes where we were like looking at older movies between those years, but that, I guess I could just say, from the year 1900 all the way up to 1969, on Animation Pilgrimage, there have been 116 episodes. That includes wrap-up episodes and episodes where we talk about animation, or like the TV shows and specials and stuff like that.
So that was before we got to the 70s.
That's before everything up to the 70s. And then the 70s, just the 70s, not older episodes, has been 104. So almost half. So 116 compared to 104. Almost half of the Animation Pilgrimage episodes have been talking about the 1970s. And that includes this episode that we're in right now, which
oh my God,
I would like to call the Lizard and Cat Grand Awards, even though we're not really giving any awards out this time. But
it's a retrospective.
It's a retrospective on all of the 70s because people wanted to know what we thought was the best and worst out of the entirety of the 70s.
Well, yeah, and I mean, people wanted us to do this. They suggested it after we finished the 60s, too. It's
because
like, you should have done the whole decade.
The 60s was split in 2 or 3 pieces, and then we never did, like, a retrospective on it, and I think it's too late at this point. I don't remember any of the movies we watched in the 60s. I couldn't remember half the movies we watched in the 70s. I gotta tell you, this last week, we have been rewatching and looking at all the movies that we've watched this decade.
Going back through the playlist.
In fact, how about we just remind everybody all the movies that we watched this decade?
Yeah.
Because there are 97 movies we watched during this decade. And they are Aladdin and His Magic Lamp, Attack Number 1, the movie, Cleopatra, Queen of Sex, Shinbone Alley, Attack Number 1, Revolution, The Phantom Tollbooth, Attack Number 1, World Championship, The Aristocats, Dougal and the Blue Cat, The Blue Bird, Attack Number 1, Immortal Bird, Animal Treasure Island, Alibaba and the 40 Thieves, Daisy Town, The Poor Miller's Boy and the Kitten, Fritz the Cat, The Three Musketeers in Boots, Snoopy, Come Home, Tintin and the Lake of Sharks, Journey Back to Oz, Marco Polo Jr., Go Get Them, 0011, Charlotte's Web, Johnny Corncob, Belladonna of Sadness, Mazinger Z vs. Devilman, Heavy Traffic, Robin Hood, Fantastic Planet, Once Upon a Time, Adventures of Mowgli, King Dick, Treasure Island, The 9 Lives of Fritz the Cat, The Three Wise Men, Down and Dirty Duck, Oliver Twist, Jack and the Beanstalk, The Glorious Musketeers, Dunderklumpen, 1001 Nights, Hugo the Hippo, Hans Christian Andersen's The Little Mermaid, Petete and Trapito, Brother Rabbit, Pinchcliffe Grand Prix, Tarzoon, Shame of the Jungle, Dick Deadeye or Duty Done, Bedbug 75, The Humpbacked Horse, The Story of the Chinese Gods, The 12 Tasks of Asterisk, Puss in Boots Travels Around the World, Once Upon a Girl, Robot Taekwondo V, Allegro non troppo, The Smurfs and the Magic Flute, Mr. Rossi Looks for Happiness, Wizards, The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, The Wild Swans, Gulliver's Travels, Raggedy Ann and Andy, A Musical Adventure, Matty the Goose Boy, Race for Your Life, Charlie Brown, The Rescuers, Mr. Rossi's Dreams, Space Battleship Yamato, The Mouse and His Child, Dot and the Kangaroo, Goldwing 123, Kanji and Pachui, Krabate, The Sorcerer's Apprentice, Ringing Bell, Thumbelina, Science Ninja Teen Gatchaman, The Movie, The Water Babies, Farewell to Space Battleship Yamato, Watership Down, Metamorphosis, The Lord of the Rings, Lupin III, The Mystery of Mamo, Nutcracker Fantasy, Taro the Dragon Boy, Foam Bath, Prince Nisha's Triumph Against Dragon King, Adventures of the Polar Cubs, Galaxy Express 3-9, Aim for the Ace, The Bugs Bunny Roadrunner Movie, Ubu et la Grande Gueule, Lupin III, The Castle of Cagliostro, The Little Convict, Seven Brothers, and Johnny Destiny, Space Ninja.
Dear Lord. Need a drink of water?
I think I'm good, but thank you for asking. As you can tell, that was a lot of movies, and I'm sure people that watched along forgot some of those movies existed because...
I sure did.
Me too. So, like I said before, that is 97 films. Now, Tennille, I did some statistics.
Yeah.
For 97 movies. Now, we have the usual two categories of statistics. And
right.
I want to have you make some guesses here for me.
Yeah.
Breaking down by country, what country gave us the most animated films?
Japan.
Yes.
Like, not even a contest.
You say that, but they only pulled ahead in the final year.
Really?
Yeah. Turns out the USA still made almost as many films as Japan.
Really?
Yeah. Japan gave us 29 films, and the US gave us 25. There is only one other country that was in the double digits. And do you want to make a guess as to who you think that was?
With this decade? France?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly 10 films from France.
Okay.
And then behind them is... So we have 29, 25, 10, and then the next is 6.
The 6 was...
6 was England and Italy. Belgium gave us 5. Hungary gave us 4. South Korea gave us 4. The USSR gave us 4. Australia and Czechoslovakia each gave us 3. Germany gave us 2. And then Argentina, China, East Germany, Finland, Mexico, Norway, Sweden, and Taiwan all gave us 1 film each. Now, important to note that if you add all those numbers together, that's more than 97, because a lot of these films weren't necessarily a production of one country, especially when you got into Europe. Oftentimes they
were a
countries
co-production. Yeah.
So that's why those numbers are more, because I counted it of if a country worked on a film, even if they weren't the only country that worked on it, they got 1 film counted for them.
Right.
Now, the other category of information I like to keep track of is the breakdown of what format these animated movies were. So, traditional...
Medium.
Yeah, what medium did they use? Traditional, stop motion, papercraft, live action, and 3D. 3D is right out because, again, 3D doesn't exist yet. But, actually, no, I don't think there's going to be any 3D yet in the 80s.
Oh, there will be.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, so near the end...
I mean, not a 3D film, but 3D will start to be used in films.
In the 80s.
Yeah.
Yes. So, it's getting closer. I don't think we're going to have a full 3D animated film in the 80s, but they might be incorporated into some films. So obviously we had 0 3D films, and the majority was traditional. I'm not even going to pretend to say it wasn't.
Yeah,
in fact,
obviously.
86 of the films count at least partially as traditionally animated films.
Wow.
86 of the 27. Or 97. What am I saying?
Of the 97, yeah. Yeah.
So there really actually wasn't a crazy amount of variety in that sense, but it doesn't really surprise me.
So that means that the remaining, 20-ish films there, or not even.
And important
10.
to note, just like with if it's multiple countries, if a movie had multiple mediums in it, I tried to count it as one.
Both.
Yeah, count one towards both. So I guess I'll just say stop motion, we had 4 films that I would say counted as stop motion. Papercraft, 5. And then live action, we had 8. We had 8 movies that had at least or around 50% live action in it. So they counted towards that.
I mean, that makes sense in that order because from, top to bottom, those are the easiest, hardest things to do.
Yeah.
So, it's easiest to get live action actors to do some stuff.
Yeah, and then Papercraft is very cheap and easy compared to stop motion.
Stop motion, yeah.
Yep. So it's
interesting.
Just kind of fascinating.
Yeah.
Those stats in particular, I think, are going to be a lot more interesting once 3D comes around because we're going to
see it shift.
It's going to shift from being majority traditional to
majority 3D eventually.
Maybe.
Well, I guess that's true. We are watching, yeah.
Japan doesn't do 3D for the longest time, but they are doing it now. They are doing it now and still making it look like it's traditionally animated.
Yeah.
So that's fascinating once that comes around, but that won't be until the 2010s.
Now, of course, if you're done with stats.
Yeah, those are my stats that's the breakdown of how all of that was.
Right. If you want to see what our thoughts were on all of these movies individually, of course, there's the Animation Pilgrimage playlists. If you want to see what our generalized thoughts were on, a given year, I recommend the award shows we have at the end of each playlist. Yes. Where we talk about, what our favorite thing was, that kind of thing. We have more specific awards. So what we're doing this time isn't going to be an award show. It's more so going to be a reflection on the decade as a whole. And then when we're done with that, we're also going to talk about our top 5 movies of the decade, our least favorite 5 movies of the decade, and then a recommendations list, which was going to be 5 movies, but I think Sean and I both ended up having more than 5 movies to recommend.
Yeah.
Besides our top 5.
Yeah, because that's important to note. We have our top 5 movies where they are our own personal favorite movies. And then we both have a list of 5 more movies, give or take, that we recommend you should also check out, but they weren't our particular favorites.
Yeah, and we have different reasons for recommending them as well.
Oh, yeah. So, they might be movies that we don't really like, but think are still important to the history of animation or something like that. But we'll get to that in a bit. But first, do we want to talk about our thoughts on the decade as a whole? Yeah,
so I like to call this the shift in time between the 60s and the 80s that we call the 70s.
Yeah, because there's honestly not a cohesive whole going on here.
Which, I mean, there never will be, especially because of...
We're covering the entire world.
Right. We, with this project that we're doing, it's not like we're covering the highlights, so you can see only the trends of animation. We're covering everything. So, yeah, you can still pick up on some of the trends, but you're more likely to be like, wow, that's a big hodgepodge, because it's going to be. We're covering everything we can. But if you do look at the trends of what was popular and what wasn't this year, it's really inconsistent.
It actually changes dramatically country by country or region by region, because I don't know if you really thought about this, but I feel like Europe was all about experimentation.
Oh, yeah.
They were doing art house films. They were experimenting with various art styles and stuff, even if they were still telling fairly traditional stories. And
story was the backseat to the artwork.
Yes, more often. Not exclusively, but more often in Europe. America, children's animated movies were dying. Which was what used to be the only thing happening in America, because what happened instead is we got adult animated things coming out in America,
Mm-hmm.
mainly because of Ralph Bakshi, but it was still backing off of The Yellow Submarine from the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
But adult animation really kicks off here in the 70s, and it's not exclusive to America.
Now, kicks off is an interesting way of saying it, because while there is a lot of content, the content is not good and it's not very popular.
No, but
it's here.
It's here. It's really starting to pick up the pace and become popular in underground
circles. Yeah,
and
it's
stuff.
a very niche market.
Because we have Osamu Tezuka in Japan making 3 different smutty films.
Mm-hmm.
We have Ralph Bakshi making
whatever it
like
is that
7
he's doing.
movies.
Yeah, I mean,
course
whatever
of
it is
this.
he's doing. His very, like, political, vulgar,
Violent.
movies. Yeah.
Yeah. Which started with like Fritz the Cat, and then he just kept going from there. And
Mm-hmm.
honestly, by the end of the 70s, he started to mellow out quite a bit, which was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of his filmography. I think we only have like 1 or 2 of his films left to watch. So, like, his prime time was here in the 70s, and we're not going to be seeing too much more of him after this point.
Like, I think we'll still see, like you said, a few more films in the 80s, maybe 1 or 2 after that, but he's mostly done.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the things people know Ralph Bakshi for are his 70s films.
Yeah.
And then Japan, the trends I saw in Japan was just they're constantly ramping up movies, and there are more companies making animation now in Japan than any other country.
Honestly, the climate we saw here in the 70s feels a lot like our animation climate here in the US now, where you have these low budget projects that are being made to make money, and then you have like the more expensive film that is a bit more risky that comes out less often.
Yes. They are just becoming a production line of creating films, and it's not just Toei Animation that's doing this anymore.
Yeah.
They have competitors. They have Sanrio. They have Tokyo Movie Shinsha. Others on top of that are coming around and also producing a lot of films.
Toei, if anything, is feeling really outclassed by any other studio making a movie. However, Toei is still producing the most movies.
Yes, because they're just making so many of them. I would say that there is a general trend of the movies starting to go towards science fiction in Japan. Like, with the popularization of Space Battleship Yamato, and then at the end with Gundam, it's just starting to pick up here at the end. Oh, and Galaxy Express 3.9.
3.9 and Science Ninja Team Gatchaman.
Stuff like that
Yeah.
are starting to lead into this, and we're going to see a lot more of that in the 80s itself. But
That's
like,
definitely a trend that is starting.
Yeah, it's starting here, and it's going to be everywhere going forward.
Everywhere, yeah. Well, and, you know, speaking of trends and science fiction, there's a distinct difference between something that feels like it comes from the mindset of 60s filmmaking and the very beginnings of what I would consider like 80s filmmaking, where, you know, we watch some films and it's just really lackluster, really uninspired, and I'm just like, this feels like I'm watching something from the 50s or 60s. But where I feel like the films that are starting to take us more into the 80s is films that like put a lot more care into giving the characters drama that might not be well-written drama. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't, but like stories that focus more on the drama and characterization, not necessarily the things that are happening to them, but how those things make them feel.
That is definitely becoming a thing.
Exactly.
Where I guess older films were more often character goes here, does thing, and it's a grand adventure, but we don't really get a lot of introspection on how the characters are dealing with it or anything like that.
Right. And like we're starting to get that. And that, I think, those are the films that do the best in this decade, and the films that are also experimental with how the story is told and the art direction that they use to tell it. I feel are the stories that do the best in this decade. Like, you know, Fritz, just Fantastic Planet. It's just a lot of really weird out there stuff, but like that's the stuff that gets big. That's the stuff that gets noticed.
The one about the rabbits, you know.
Watership Down. Yeah, exactly. Like those are what persist. And then the 80s finds a way to make that more marketable.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with everything you said there.
And, you know, I think that pretty much
wraps up how I feel about it.
And I really can't emphasize this enough. I know this is so hard to think about nowadays with Disney being the absolute monopoly of a company that it is. But, like, it is important to remember that here in the 70s, Disney was a dying company. And in a lot of the 80s, like the majority of the 80s, there's still going to be a dying company that
a dying rough and
almost gets bought out.
They almost get bought out by other companies. They, like, the only thing that they have going for them is things that aren't the animation studio.
Well, that aren't the animation studio and, like, nostalgia of things, but even then the market of nostalgia was not the same thing as it is now. Like it just wasn't. Like they weren't marketing towards people's childhoods, and people weren't interested in that kind of thing as much as they are now. So yeah, that being said, Sean, do we want to go ahead and talk about our top 5, bottom 5, and recommended watches? What order do we want to do this in?
Well, let's start with the worst.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what we thought were the worst 5 movies in the decade.
I'm really curious what our lists are going to be compared to each other.
I could see them being similar. I could see them being very different, because I would say that there were at least another 3 to 5 films that I could have put on my list, but I didn't, because there are 97 films.
Right. There's just such a huge catalog. And I would say that for all of my lists, none of these are in a particular order.
This is the only one that I actually did put in a particular order.
Really? Okay.
I felt like there was one movie in particular I never, ever want to see again. But the other 4, I feel like the badness goes up with each consecutive film on my list. So I'll start with my least bad.
Okay.
Of the 5 worst. I put The Water Babies on here.
I did too.
Because the animation is terrible. And so it's just a half animated movie, half live action movie. We've talked about it in the review. The
stories are just are completely different. You have the live action movie and you have the animated film, and
they don't have really anything to do with each other.
Yeah.
It is a tale of folly on the production company of trying to adapt a shitty thing by a shitty person, but then they just try to turn it into a different story akin to like
Wizard of Oz.
The Wizard of Oz, which does not work. And they don't know how animation works. They don't realize the kind of time it takes. It's just an arrogant project to make money, and it fails in every regard. And it kind of makes you happy to see it. It makes you happy to see that it fails so horribly, and like the folly of the people creating this.
Oh, so you are saying it does have a little bit of enjoyability because it's so bad.
No.
Oh, okay.
The movie is terrible in every way. The only thing that brings joy to my heart is to know this movie failed so badly.
Okay, I was really confused by your wording. I was just like, wait, so you enjoyed that?
No.
I didn't get it.
I put no so bad it's good movies on this list.
Right.
These are the movies I actively never want to watch again. And like, I appreciate the fact that this movie didn't do well.
I see. I gotcha.
No one liked it.
Right.
It was a cash grab, and it failed. And I'm happy
and that makes you happy.
I'm happy that the cash grab failed.
Your spite is coming through.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
It doesn't come through a lot.
just a little bit of spite.
This is pretty
as
much
a treat.
This is the only one that I really feel spiteful. I think.
All right, I'm gonna put. I'll take the next one here.
Yes.
I feel like this is one you probably didn't put on your list, but I felt very passionately about how much I didn't like this one. And that is Oliver Twist in 1974.
You are correct. I did not put that on my list. But it is bad.
This is one that I feel is bad. One, because like it's just not very good. Like it's just not a very good children's movie. And that's the market it's aiming for.
Mm-hmm.
It's aiming for kids. But what I remember really disliking about it is that it was really irresponsible with its messages and theming to the point where I feel like if a kid watches this, it's actually doing more harm for the child than good.
Yep, I could see that.
So, yeah, I just found this film to be really irresponsible.
Okay.
And so that pissed me off. Plus,
Fair.
It was just bad.
Yeah. Changing to a completely different demographic for my next movie, I put King Dick on my list. It is a softcore adult comedy movie from Italy. There is no budget. It's just trying to appeal to horny.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not enjoyable to watch in any way. It just sucks.
Mm-hmm.
And not in a good way.
On a similar note, I do not have King Dick on my list, but I do have Tarzoon, Shame of the Jungle from 1975.
Also from Italy.
Yeah.
Italy really leaned into the adult, and you actually just hit it on the head with my number one least favorite movie from the 70s.
Really? This was your least favorite film?
Tarzoon was so unbearably gross and dick-wavy on every aspect all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So mean-spirited and gross, and like, I never want to watch this movie.
I don't want to think about this movie.
Yeah. That's why it is my least favorite movie out of all of the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
It was terrible.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and there was so much of it we just couldn't even like talk about or show because like it was just too graphic.
There was nudity on every screen.
Yeah,
but like dumb cartoon penis monsters everywhere. It was so bad.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Blech. Again, on the same note, I didn't put King Dick, but I did put Once Upon a Girl from 1976, just because this was another one that was trashy, and it's not like, Sean and I are completely against watching trashy shit. I found the Osamu Tezuka.
Oh, the Osamu Tezuka movies were 10 times better than this because there was at least some amount of budget and
like story and jokes. Yeah, but like this Once Upon a Girl thing is just it's so poorly animated and unappealing and nothing.
It's another really gross cash grab at horny.
Yeah.
This time from America.
Yeah.
Yay.
Do you have any others on your list?
Yeah, because you still haven't hit two of my movies.
Okay, I still have one more, so go ahead.
All right. My next movie I want to talk about is Ubu.
That's my last one.
Ubu at La Grande Gueule.
Someone in the comments of that video was like, your pronunciation of this title has me folded over. And I don't know if that means folded over laughing or like the kind of cringe you do where your whole body just like snaps in half.
You're saying it so wrong, and I'm sure I am.
Uh-huh.
I do know at least the name of the guy is Ubu. And you can't stop me from that because they say it a lot.
But as much as you might cringe, audience, at our pronunciation of it, this movie makes us cringe by watching it.
Because it is the most emblematic recent version of the really bad, dumb, pretentious art house film.
Yeah.
It is just meh.
A papercraft, ugly-looking movie based on a play that is a parody of Hamlet and King Lear.
Add in some levels of translation issues and not really knowing what the hell is going on.
Uh-huh.
And it just becomes an incomprehensible mess of not funny, ugly, gross looking film.
Yeah. Yeah. This was another one that was just like unbearable to look at, and I don't like thinking about it.
Absolutely.
So what was your last film then?
He had to end up on the list in some way.
Mm-hmm.
The 9 Lives of Fritz the Cat. And it's not even by Ralph Bakshi.
So you're picking the Ralph Bakshi related movie that wasn't even made by him.
Yep. Because they took Fritz and made him worse somehow without Ralph Bakshi being involved.
Uh-huh.
I didn't want to just fill this list with all of Ralph Bakshi's work, because I don't think all of it is terrible, but I really debated between this movie, The 9 Lives of Fritz the Cat, versus Heavy Traffic, because I feel like they're both very similar in just being gross, ugly adult films with bad, just gross
ethics
messages. And they were terrible. I went with this one because Fritz the Cat is actually the worst ever in this movie.
Yeah.
And it's like 20 stories in one, and they're all bad.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't want to see this guy try to sleep with his sister or bow down to Hitler and follow him and do whatever he wants him to do. That does not sound appealing to me in any way.
No.
So that's why this one is on my list of the worst movies.
Yeah. I was surprised with myself because as much as I don't like Ralph Bakshi's work, I couldn't find myself like genuinely putting any of his films here on my worst list. Mostly just because as awful as a lot of them were, these other movies were worse.
Yeah. I like those other movies. Like, I don't think he is the worst film director on out of the 70s. But he's really close to the bottom.
He's really close to the bottom, and so as a general whole, his movies haven't made it onto any of my lists in general.
They actually did for me. But we'll have to talk about it when we get there.
And for me, it's mostly just because, like, I just don't feel like there's any conversation to really be had about him. Like, he's one of the most influential directors in animation here in America, especially in the 70s, if you're just talking about the 70s. But, like, other than the fact that he made raunchy political satire and, like, vulgar things that hadn't been put to screen before, like, I just don't see there being much of a conversation to be had.
Okay. That's fair.
I'd rather forget about him.
Well, say what you want. Do we want to talk about our favorite 5 or the other 5 movies that we think you should check out, even if they weren't our absolute favorites?
Let's go through our top 5, because I feel like that's...
It segues better into...
What else we recommend.
Yeah,
exactly.
That seems good. So these I just put in alphabetical order.
Okay.
Because I was like, I don't know. I could choose a best out of these 5, but I don't think it matters. And this is by no means saying that these 5 movies are the actual best from this decade, but these are my personal favorites. So let's start with my first favorite, Allegro non troppo. It's who could have seen that coming? It's the Fantasia, the comedy Fantasia movie from Italy. It's not all perfect, but they're doing Fantasia, but actually putting effort into it and having fun with the concept. And a couple of the segments are really well done and a lot of fun. I just really like Fantasia style movies when they're not mocking Fantasia.
Right. It's like when they're earnestly doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed this movie. I think the execution worked. It has some dark jokes, but I'm okay with that. And I really enjoyed this one, and I suggest people check it out if that's something they're into as well.
Mm-hmm. I'll start with actually one of the last movies we watched for this decade, Lupin the Third: Castle of Cagliostro.
Mm-hmm.
Just a solid film, one I hadn't seen before.
Absolutely.
And, like, it was just a delight.
Oh, it's good.
It's very much the kind of film that's like, this feels like we're getting into the 80s.
Yes. And yeah,
you know, like, it's a pre-Studio Ghibli movie.
Oh, yeah. It's gorgeous to look at. The animation is probably the best out of the entire decade.
Yeah.
I honestly think this movie is my pick for the best movie out of the entire decade, if I had to choose one.
Yeah, it'd be really hard for me to choose, but it's definitely...
It's up there.
Yeah, obviously. It's in our top 5.
It's in our top 5s because, yes, it's in my top 5 as well. And it's just so pretty to look at. And it's right at the end of the decade where they've had the most experience getting up to this point. So, and
Lupin's been around for a while, so they feel like they've got a good grasp on his character and what they do and don't want to do with him for a film.
Yeah, so
which was kind of controversial, I think, at the time for his characterization, but like
seeing people talk about it on the episode, we can see that a lot of people would agree this movie is one of the best Lupin movies. So that's good to hear.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
I love it.
All right. Next movie on my list, Johnny Corncob. Because Johnny Corncob is beautiful.
It's a really beautiful film.
It is so pretty, and it's just...
It's a folklore story.
It's just a folklore story, and it's great. I love every aspect of it. Oh, shoot, who made it? Hungry. I was pretty sure it was Hungry, but I wanted to double check, because during our 79 review, we kept saying the wrong country.
Oh, did we?
Yeah, it was Hungry that made Foam Bath. Hungry made Foam Bath.
Oh, yeah.
We kept doing it wrong, so I put in like these really awkward Hungry overdubs. But they also made Johnny Corncob, and I think this very artistic style that we went with is beautiful. I think the voice acting works very well with it for how limited it is.
It's the art direction of Yellow Submarine done right.
Yes.
Like,
I would agree.
It's like, you know, I didn't jive with Yellow Submarine, but I did jive with Johnny Corncob.
This movie's just fantastic. I love it. I love this movie.
Love it.
It's great.
Another one on my list is Ringing Bell. It's just really solid. Like, it has the feel of a Disney's Silly Symphonies cartoon, which, you know, I don't have any proof that, like, that's what it was inspired by, but, like, there's some shots from Ringing Bell that are, like, direct shot comparisons to some Silly Symphony cartoons. So I feel pretty confident in saying that, like, one inspired the other. And I think that's so cool. I think Ringing Bell tells its story really well. And it's just kind of it's one of those films that I actually think harkens backward. Because, you know, we were talking about there's some films in the 70s that feel like they're outdated and old and harken back to older stuff too much. And then there's stuff that feels like, you know, oh, we're moving towards the 80s.
Yeah.
And Ringing Bell, I feel, balances that line really well, where it harkens backward, but the story and characterization and drama all pushes things forward.
Yeah.
And it's got great designs. Like, so good.
Good film.
Yeah.
So the next
nice and short too.
Yeah. So the next movie on my list, which would be my number 3, was Lupin the Third. So we already talked about that one. So I'm just going to move on to my 4th movie, which was the Pinchcliffe Grand Prix.
I'm glad this was on your list.
Yeah.
It was really charming.
This beautifully made stop motion movie is like very slow paced. It's just a guy and his penguin and this weird gremlin guy that's really sad and scared entering a car race, and they make their own car and it just turns out really well, and it's just so heckin' charming.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoyed this movie.
And then finding out that this is like a traditional like holiday film
Mm-hmm.
that is watched over and over in Norway, right?
That's what I'm double checking. Yes, Norway.
That it's like a holiday film that's like people watch every year in Norway. Like, that's so heckin' charming. I like that this film has persisted.
Mm-hmm.
Because it is. It's just really cute and well made.
Yeah. A++.
Another one of my picks is The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh.
Mm-hmm. I can see that, yeah.
Winnie the Pooh's a character that's lasted a long time. It's one of Disney's biggest brands, and like this series of short films made into a movie is just really good. I don't think I have to go much more into why Winnie the Pooh is a good movie.
Yeah, fair. It's a heckin' charmin' bop.
Mm-hmm.
So good. So my last film
Mm-hmm.
is Space Battleship Yamato.
I'm not surprised.
It's just a really fun space drama, even if it's incredibly slow in the first half, but like, and it's a compilation film of a TV show, but I just feel like nothing else has been like it up to this point, and it does a very good job at what it wanted to do, and I enjoyed watching it a whole bunch.
Mm-hmm.
That's about all I have to say about it. I don't even think this movie is within the top 10 most technically best movies from this decade, but I just really enjoyed watching this one so much.
It jived with you.
Yes. It fed my soul, just like Allegro Non Troppo did.
Uh-huh. I still have two more on my list.
Mm-hmm.
One is Robin Hood.
Mm-hmm.
Easily, for me. Like, I think this is easily the best movie Disney made in the 70s.
It was one of my two runner-up films.
Uh-huh.
Of, like, if I could add more than 5 on my list, Robin Hood would have been on there as the only Disney film that I would add to my list, because it's just a really fun time, and it's like the only good, other than Winnie the Pooh, it's the only good Disney film that came out during the 70s.
Yeah, and I think that Robin Hood, it's kind of easy to forget how good this one is, if that makes sense. Because it kind of feels like it's in the same vein of a lot of the other Disney movies coming out around this time. But it's just got so much more punch and comedy to it. The designs and the animation really stand out, even though it has like a lot of reused animation.
They still make it work.
Yeah, they still make it work. And it's just a really strong film. And easily Disney's best of this decade.
Mm-hmm.
And then my other top pick is Watership Down.
Wow, who could have seen that coming?
Who could have seen that coming? For me, this is probably my favorite movie of the decade. It's just something that's up my alley, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But I also just really like how out there it is. As far as like an animated film goes, like, who do you market this towards? Nobody and everybody at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
It's a niche film that has gained popularity in the animation community.
With each passing year.
With each passing year, and like it gets more and more recognized, and I think that's really cool. I like that Watership Down kind of has this like rite of passage to it for a lot of people in the animation community, where you're like, oh yeah, I remember the first time I watched Watership Down, and like, it's hard to explain. It's just, it's a neat film, and it's always interesting to hear when people first come across it.
Yeah.
And then I think once you even get past the like traumatizing parts of it, there's still a lot to talk about in terms of like its themes and the art direction and what it's done for like animal stories in general. Like,
yeah.
And that goes more into like novels and stuff, but yeah.
That's fair.
Mm-hmm.
So I did have one other runner-up
Oh, okay.
that I wanted to talk about.
I mean, does this then make us we're going into the recommended watches?
No, this is still in my top 5.
But it's not your top 5.
Yeah, like I said, I have a top 5, 2 runners-up, and then I had 5 other recommendations.
Okay.
Ralph Bakshi's The Lord of the Rings.
Really?
Yeah. I just really enjoyed how cheesy that movie was. And I don't think I'll ever see another movie pull off the level of 70's
D&D camp.
emblematic cheese that you would get out of... I don't see this ever getting to this level again.
Mm-hmm.
It's just so hokey and cheesy. It just works so well.
It really does feel like an animated film of people LARPing in the woods.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're not going to get anything else like that.
Uh-huh. And that's why I want to bring it up, because it reminds me of my childhood. Even though I never watched this movie as a child.
Uh-huh.
It just feels like high school and getting into Dungeons and Dragons for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
It was fun.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
But I don't think everybody needs to watch it.
Uh-huh.
Speaking of movies that I think everybody should watch if you're wanting to watch movies from the 70's,
Uh-huh.
I have a list of 5 influential movies that I think people should check out if you really want to look at some of the overarching trends.
See, and this is interesting because for your list, you actually pulled a me and you're like trying to pick out the ones that you feel are most important to the decade.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas for me, I with my recommended watches, I actually pulled out ones that I feel are kind of bypassed and are kind of like, I think this is a gem that isn't talked about.
Okay, so there's a very good chance we could have very different lists.
Exactly.
They might be overlapping in some ways, but we'll have to see. So, how about you start off this time?
All right. The first one, and this is going to be in year order. First one I recommend is Shinbone Alley. This one has stuck with me. It's from 1970. This one has stuck with me just because it feels familiar still, and no one has been able to tell me why.
I would agree. I can't tell you why either. It's such a weird movie about
a cat
and a cockroach or something?
Yeah.
What was he?
Yeah, he was like a cockroach who was a writer.
That killed himself and then was reincarnated as a bug.
Yeah.
It was a weird
Mahinabel.
Mahinabel is the name of the cat gal.
Yeah. But like the character designs in this movie are good.
Mm-hmm.
The art style is what really gets me, I think, and is the part that feels really familiar.
Yeah.
But I don't know why.
Yeah.
I don't know. This one just sticks with me and I want other people to see it.
Okay. Fair. I put these in order by alphabetical again.
Mm-hmm.
So the first one on my list is Belladonna of Sadness. This movie is very beautiful, was incredibly popular in Japan.
Easily the prettiest film we watched this decade.
I hate the message.
I hate it so much.
I hate the idea that a woman
needs to suffer
sexually to then use that same sexualness to control other people. That just feels gross and wrong in every single way.
Mm-hmm.
But this movie was so beautiful.
It's one of those stories where the person becomes strong through their trauma, or like they get empowered through their trauma. They get
traumatized by a thing, and then they use that thing to become powerful, even though that is very traumatic to them. But they use that to their advantage, And it just takes leaps and bounds to understand how that would ever work in reality.
Right. Yeah.
It wouldn't.
Yeah. To each their own, but yeah, this isn't for me. But if you can get through that, I think we have a content warning at the beginning of the episode, tell you exactly, what it is that's so traumatizing about it. But,
it's very pretty.
So watch at your discretion. But yeah, it is a beautiful film.
Yep.
Another one on my list is Fantastic Planet from 1973.
Yep. I had that one on my list as well.
This is peak sci-fi.
70s sci-fi.
Yeah.
This is peak old school weirdo sci-fi.
Yeah. Like, this isn't fun, wacky space adventures time. Like, The Last Frontier, this is really a Western in space kind of sci-fi. No, this is like...
This is more of a Star Trek than a Star Wars.
Existential horror.
Yep.
Yeah. Unsettling, but in a fun way. I don't like horror, but this is more of just like...
uncanny.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so strange.
Yeah. It's a really neat film. Your turn, I guess.
Okay. Well, Fantastic Planet was also on my list.
Uh-huh.
I have Fritz the Cat.
Yeah.
If you want to know why people started really doing adult animated films, look no further than Fritz the Cat. It's probably your best...
One of the most influential films of the decade.
Yeah, one of the most influential films of the decade. It came out right at the beginning there.
1972.
Yeah, and it's probably Ralph Bakshi's best work at making a grungy, gross adult film.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. It's like, I was not angry watching this one. I was just fascinated.
Yeah.
The whole time.
Until you get to like the end. And then you're just like...
Yeah. Well, yes.
Yeah.
But like, I feel like this one is worthwhile checking out for that. Like, know why people are watching these kinds of films.
Next one on my list is Adventures of Mowgli from 1973 from the USSR. It's a really cool adaptation of The Jungle Book. It's got some really great art direction and character animation going on.
Yeah.
It's just a good film. It's worth checking out.
I would agree. It's a very good film.
Yeah.
Yeah. The last movie on my list, because I also had Watership Down, because of course people should check out Watership Down.
Right.
But the last one I have is Raggedy Ann and Andy.
Musical adventure?
Because the movie is terrifying. But the animation is so good.
And charming at times, too.
The animation done in this movie, this is a Richard Williams movie, right?
Yeah.
He and his team do such a good job animating the things in this movie. It looks so pretty, and it makes me scared. I don't like looking at it. I love looking at it.
It's uncanny. Yeah.
It's the whole film, and I really suggest people checking it out if they want to see some of the most interesting animation, actual flowing animation to come out of this decade. And like, that's my list. Those are the movies I think people should look at. I know you have more. I
do have a few more. You've mentioned a few of them. So I'm just going to kind of rapid fire some of these other ones. Dunderklupen, I have on my list from 1974. This is, I feel, on a similar level to Pinchcliffe Grand Prix, where I think it's really charming. I think this is a really charming film, and it's it's like the only film we've seen from this country, which was Sweden?
Yes.
Yeah, it's like the first film Sweden's done, and it was good.
It's great.
Another one on my list was Hugo the Hippo, done by the same studio in Hungary that did Johnny Corncob. vibed with this one a little bit more than Johnny Corncob. I feel like it was a slight evolution of the art style from Johnny Corncob and has a little bit more of a, like, fun story to go with it.
I guess. I still feel like Johnny Corncob is the superior movie over the
Hugo
Hippo.
the Hippo. Fair enough. I just think that this one's also worth checking out. Dick Deadeye or Duty Done was a fun comedy movie that is all in the art style of the graphic designer Richard Searles, I think his name is. But that was interesting. Again, just another one that I think is worth checking out because it's a bit of a gem nobody would otherwise hear about. Then there's a few others that you already mentioned, Pinchcliffe Grand Prix and Allegro Non Troppo. And then the last one I have on my list is Foam Bath. Because while this isn't necessarily a good movie, it's a cohesive story that ends up, like, kind of tying itself together in the end.
Mm-hmm.
And the art direction is wild. This is one of those where if you're an art student, I specifically recommend you checking this one out because you're an art student.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, this will get your brain firing and, like, thinking about shit. Because it's just wild. But otherwise, I'd probably recommend you skip this one. So It's one of those very circumstantial recommendations.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that was the 70s. Anything else you want to add, Sean?
I'm glad we're done.
Yeah. The 70s isn't exactly my favorite decade of all time.
There are certainly some films in there that I listed off that I enjoyed, but I'm ready to move on.
Yeah. I mean, you know, these are the ones we talked about. But most everything else, I could very easily never watch again and be very happy.
Mm-hmm. Again, 97 films that we talked about at most 30 of them, about the best and worst. At most, we talked about that many. There are still like 60 to 70 other films in there that we don't even want to mention again.
Right. It's like
they don't matter.
Yeah. It's like there's so much that's just like, well, I saw that. And, you know, sometimes we have moments where, you know, movies make us frustrated, like Galaxy Express 39, or movies that traumatized us slightly, like Adventures of Polar Cubs. But a lot of times there were films that were just like snooze fests that I can barely remember, like Aladdin and His Magic Lamp.
Mm-hmm. Or Charlie Brown movie number 2.
Yeah.
Like, they just don't do enough.
Snoopy Come Home being just, like, depression fodder for children.
Mm-hmm. Like, a lot of these movies don't need to exist. So, that's it for the 70s. Next up, it's time to head backwards again.
It's not. We're so close.
We have 3 films to go back to from before the 70s. And then we move forward and actually get into big hair and rock music.
Yeah! 80s, we're coming for ya.
See you guys then.